Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Have you ever thought about what heaven would be like? This was the question asked by my fellow trainee chaplain, who was a priest in formation, to a patient we were visiting as a group during our hospital training. This was also a mistake. First, because we were in the psych ward speaking to a suicidal patient. And second, because I was in the room and I had strong opinions about the answer. And when the training group had finished explaining why that might not have been the most appropriate question at the moment, they asked me, Michael, you were like, wait, what do you think heaven is like? And I told them, I said, I'm there, and I hear a voice. And that voice is saying, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzvaot, Melech kol haaretz kevodo. AKA, holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. Holy, holy, holy. This is Isaiah, by the way, Isaiah 6. Right? He visits heaven. It was, by the way, at this point in my chaplaincy training that I believe it became apparent I was not quite like the other priests. Although I admit it may have been earlier on day one. And my final evaluation for chaplaincy included the line, Chaplain Walden learned the ropes in a mere few weeks and then spent the rest of the program trying to hang himself with them. But that idea of holiness as a fundamental part of heaven, as Isaiah is visiting heaven in that vision, and yet of earth, malo kol haaretz kevodo, is something I want to dive into, because this week's Parsha is Acharei and K'doshim. Right, K'doshim. And I want to go on a little bit of a tour of holiness, if you'll come with me, because K'doshim means holiness. And we begin the reading of what scholars call the Holiness Code. Right? Leviticus 19:1, it begins, Daber El kol adat bnei Yisrael ve'amarta aleichem K'doshim tiyu ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. Speak El kol adat to every witness, to every member of the community of Israel, and say to them, K'doshim tiyu, holy you shall be, ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem, for holy I am your God. Amazing. Clear and straightforward. One problem. What does it actually mean? I'm serious. What does it mean to be holy? Because if you look it up in certain places, you can actually end up in this great loop where it talks about being sacred for God, and then how sacredness is about holiness for God, and then you use it in the dictionary, flipping. It turns out that being holy is a lot like the word God in English itself, right? Everyone uses it. Everyone has a vague sort of idea what it means, and then you dive in deeper, and few people actually know what it means, and not only that, all their meanings and interpretations are a bit different. The level 2 sort of meaning of holiness, or K'doshim, right? Well, we might look at the Hebrew Kedusha, right? Holiness means consecrated to divinity, sanctified, but Kedusha specifically refers to set apart. And this makes a little bit of common sense when we think about our tradition, right? We say the Kiddush to sanctify and set apart the wine we are drinking. We say the Chatzi Kaddish to distinguish between our different sections of prayer. By the way, I want to go on a quick tangent because I can. Is holiness a binary status? No. Who said it? Holiness, Mishnah Kelim actually specifies, right? It says, Eser Kedushot 10, right? There are 10 levels of holiness, right? And we don't know if there's exactly 10. There's 10 in the specific area they're talking about, but there are distinctions and gradations of holiness. But back to our verse. I wanted to go on this tour of holiness because our commentators have a lot to say. Chizkuni says, this verse, this idea, holy you shall be, is talking about all the commandments. Rashi says, no. God is talking about these specific commandments. That's what holiness is linked to, right? You do these things, you're holy. Ibn Ezra joins the Rashi, says, yep, that's it. Right? The Datzikanim says, well, actually, God is saying he's holy, so you'll be holy. It's just like this tautological circle of holiness. There's a few of those. Or Chachaim. Or Chachaim has a field day, by the way. He writes pages and pages and pages on this. He adds a few interesting ideas. He says, holiness is this concept that is simultaneously an adjective and a verb. That the doing is somehow bound up in the descriptor. I thought that was very interesting. And Rabbeinu Bachya links this to Exodus 19, right, which it says, right, Atem tiyuli, right, Mamlechet kohanim ve'goy kadosh. You shall be a separate and sanctified people, a community of priests. Actually, Rabbeinu Bachya also has a field day and points out that the people Israel are created holy, but in a latent way, and now after Sinai, we can express it to each other. There's a lot of these, but I'm just throwing them out there. You don't have to say, I love them all. I mean, it's like a shopping trip, You take one off the shelf, you look at it, you put it back, right? So there's a few more. Nachmanides, it's about the commandments, right? And cleaving to God. Holiness is about commandments. Rashbam says, well, actually, it's not really about God. God doesn't need commandments. It's about you. And cleaving to commandments helps you out, but you can sort of become holy through God, but God doesn't need it. He's a little muddled. Sforno says it's about the image of God, right? All of these commandments we do are actually about understanding God's image, connecting to God's image. To be holy, so we get a bunch of commandments in this parsha. We're told, you shall be holy. Sforno says, that's the link. You want to be in the image of God, you do these things. And Toldot Yitzchak adds one interesting idea here that I think is worth saying. Holiness for one person is not like holiness for another. Why does it need to give all these commandments and then say, you shall be holy? It's because when you're doing them, you're aiming at different spots. Honoring your mother and father might mean one thing to one person, and frankly, in another family situation, it might mean another. But in both, even though there's totally different courses of action, we're not prescribing what you should do, you're just aiming for holiness. Whew, that's a lot. Are we okay? We still with me? Okay. The Sifra, right, says, listen, don't complicate things. Sifra is a midrash, a sort of a proto-rabbinic commentary, an allegorical one. It says, the line should read, perushim tihiyu, right, from lifrosh, to separate. It should be separated you shall be. Okay, that was our tour. Now we'll comment on it a bit. What are we left with when we take in all of these various ideas? What do they synthesize into? We have sort of what we might call in Latin, right, imitatio Deo, right? You're trying to be like God. And we also have this idea that holiness is about distinction, whether that is a verb or adjective, actually. But then we're left with a bunch of questions, too. Is being holy related to our thoughts and being? Is Kedusha related to our actions and the commandments? Is it about specific commandments or all of them? And I believe the tour, frankly, if I am reading your faces correctly, and with me too, has left us more confused than when we started. I want to acknowledge, by the way, in the ancient world, holiness was probably a little bit more delineated and less abstract, but we don't have access to the ancient world. All of these conceptions of holiness, and by the way, those are just Jewish ones, because holiness is not linked to a culture. Its usage as a word and concept has actually peaked in English in the 1840s and has gone down a bit, although has seen somewhat of a revival in the past decade. A little bit, you can watch the word usage. But I want to offer an idea I was reading from Rabbi Sachs, because in some sense, what I'm driving at with all of these definitions within this tour is that Jews were and remain a people summoned to holiness. When we focus on the verse, when we focus on the commandments, we might see, okay, in this immediate context, it means honoring your parents, be holy, doing this, be holy. But it clearly means something larger as well. And it turns out, Kadoshim tells us what it is. To be holy is to love your neighbor and love the stranger. It means not stealing, lying, or deceiving others. It means not standing idly by when someone else's life is in danger. It means not cursing the deaf, putting a stumbling block before the blind, insulting or taking advantage of others even when they are completely unaware of it, because God is not unaware. It means not hating people, not bearing a grudge, not taking revenge. If someone has done you wrong, don't hate them. Remonstrate with them. Let them know what they've done and how it has hurt you. Give them a chance to apologize and make amends, and then forgive them. Above all, being holy means have the courage to be different. At the end of the day, this is the root meaning of kadosh in Hebrew. It means something distinctive. It means something set apart. Be holy, for the Lord your God, I, the Lord your God, am holy, is frankly an incredibly counterintuitive statement. How can you be like God? God's infinite. I don't know about y'all, but I happen to not be infinite. God is eternal and we're mortal. God is vaster than the universe and we are a speck upon its surface. And yet, the Torah says, in one way, in one respect, we can be like God. Obviously, I was joking with the priest in training and all the priests. It was mostly priests and me. And we had a good laugh about it later. But there is one part I stand by. Holiness, as described, as explained, isn't any single thing. It's that constellation of factors aiming us towards divinity, intrinsically linked with being a Jew. And like that verse in Isaiah, heaven, when Isaiah was there, right? Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. Heaven is a place where at every moment the inhabitants are aware of holiness. Kal v'chomer, it follows then that when we live in communities, when we can contextualize our actions and ourselves in the language of holiness, that we can create a little bit of heaven on earth. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Yeshua.
We find ourselves